Welcome to episode 161 of the XS Noize Podcast. I'm Mark Millar. Thanks for listening. In this episode, I speak to Katherine and Jessica from Smoke Fairies about their new album, Carried in Sound. If you missed the previous episode, I spoke to Chris Turpin, one half of British indie blues rock duo Ida May, about their latest album, Thunder Above You. So check it out, and if you like the podcast, please subscribe on your favourite listening platform, give us a rating, and leave a comment. Smoke Fairies is a project founded on friendship. Katherine Blamire and Jessica Davies have known one another since they were kids, forming a band to escape the humdrum of high school. On new album Carried in Sound, the duo proved themselves to be utterly self-reliant, moving through a pandemic, home recording, and true independence to forge something completely faithful to their ambitions. In this interview, Katherine and Jessica talk about writing and recording the album, becoming the first UK band to sign with Jack White's Third Man label, touring with Bryan Ferry, 80s guilty pleasures, and lots more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the XS Noize Podcast with Smoke Fairies. So hi Katherine, hi Jessica, welcome to the XS Noize Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
It's great to have you. I've been loving the album. Hopefully we can find out more, but I'd like to go back to the start. Can you remember the first band or artist that made you pay attention to music?
Oh, that's a good question.
It might have been different for each of us.
Yeah, you go first.
I was like obsessed with the Beach Boys. I heard it in my cousin's car when we were on holiday, and I just couldn't get over the arrangements of the harmonies and the kind of interplay between the kind of lyrics and like the way they all kind of played a role in creating this one sound. And that took me away.
I think for me, it was kids' TV, like things like Bagpuss and stuff, and maybe even Rainbow. You've probably never had an artist come on here and say that Rainbow was a formative influence, but they had Rod, Jane and Freddie, who always used to do these funny musical interludes, and I loved it.
I didn't know you were going to go back that far.
Well, it was the first musical influence, so there we go.
Have you ever seen the funny video, the adult version of Rainbow?
I haven't. I don't want to taint my very pure memory of it.
Well, there's a video online, and it's all the actual actors.
Oh, really?
All the things that they're saying, there's a lot of innuendo.
I've heard this. I've been tainted by it.
It definitely wouldn't be on TV. It's something they've done sort of separately. But
I'll have to go check that out after this.
No,
then
I wouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah, you're probably better leaving it. Just you don't want to scar your childhood memory.
Yeah.
So you've known each other since you were kids. So how did you both meet?
We met at school when we were 11. We were put in the same class. And originally, we really hated each other. I think it's safe to say we were arch enemies. And I don't know, over the first few years of high school, that kind of dissolved. And we suddenly...
I guess high school is a place where there's a lot of different characters interacting, and you're kind of forced to recognize who you get on with the most. And maybe at first we didn't like each other because we were a bit too similar, and then we kind of bonded. But I think it was mainly over a sense of humour. I mean, I remember we would just be in hysterics through most of our lessons, and that was probably one of the starting points, because I thought, this is much more funny and interesting than just sitting in science on my own.
Did you bond over any particular band or music?
We were really into Sheryl Crow.
Also, I remember doing America. There's a band.
Ah, yeah. That Horse with No Name. My mum had the record of that band America, and I showed it to Kath after school. And our first song that we tried to harmonise with was Horse with No Name.
It was very challenging, and I remember we were had loads of a toilet roll in our ears so that we couldn't hear each other. So we weren't quite we didn't quite understand that harmonies were about listening to each other. We were just sort of shouting as loud as we could our own bit. So I think it was probably pretty horrendous.
Who said, okay, let's form a band?
Well, you had a guitar, so you were kind of on the forefront.
I had a sort of guitar. I think, it was just like a natural thing to form. I think we thought that it was a way of getting out of school really quickly. At the time, we were also really into Hanson, and they had, they didn't have to go to school, so it seemed like a really easy way out from us.
It's like there's some kids our age who have like figured this out, and they are, they're not in school. I guess also like there must be something of the attention seeker in us, because we weren't really the kids that stood out much in school, but something about when we got behind the guitar and started singing together, we had this kind of confidence that we didn't have in other settings, I guess, that felt quite powerful. And then people started to say, oh, your voices sound really kind of complimentary. And then we're like, oh, that's even better, because then we get even more attention. So maybe it was sort of attention-seeking, I don't know, evolution.
Can you remember the first song that you wrote together that you thought, right, this is a really great song?
I mean, there were lots of really
horrific
songs. Sometimes they pop into our heads when we're just walking around. I just don't know where to start.
I wrote one called "I Want to Be Famous."
Oh, I love that one.
How did that go?
It went, yeah, I want to be famous, and I want everyone to know my name. It was, and also we sung it with these really cheesy American accents, because
I like the way it had the second line. It was like, you wanted to be famous, but it was like, and I want to help so many people take away their pain. So, it wasn't just a selfish song.
Yeah.
It really had that kind of sense of, wanting to help the whole world with the fame.
I like it. I think you should record it, for a bonus track. Maybe the next album.
That could be the first track we do for the next album. Actually, on the album we've just released, Carried in Sound, it did have several songs that we started when we were perhaps like 16 that we then revisited and decided to rewrite with hindsight, I guess, a bit more of a reflection.
Well, I've been really enjoying the new album, Carried in Sound. It's an absolute banner. So when did the recording start and the writing start for it initially?
I mean, a lot of there were a few songs where the ideas had started many, many years ago. And then I guess the pandemic provided us with a chance to kind of sit back and reflect, like all these different songs we've written over the years. And that was kind of the first kind of the beginnings of it, and then it just kind of carried on from there.
There were sort of songs that, I guess, the joy of having like a songwriting partner in a way that you've worked with for so long is that you've got these kind of bubbling ideas that you both know are kind of in the ether, that can be from any time from like last year to 10 years ago, and they're like a bit of a menu you can kind of pick and choose from after a while. And you start realizing that certain songs start to form a bit of a family, and they kind of have a certain sentiment, or I guess like a environment that they sit in, that if you put them all together, you're going to create something that works as a whole. And we've always liked the idea of working with an album in mind. And obviously like modern formats don't really kind of always put your music across in the way you want, but we want the album to be like a world that's cohesive. And when you go into it, you kind of know what the different rooms are and how you're going to live in it. And all of those songs kind of felt like they belonged in one space. So suddenly the writing got a bit easier, because it's like, well, this is what we're achieving. You sort of realize, okay, this is what we're writing about. This is the vibe. And then you write into that kind of spirit, I guess.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that. And talking about rooms, I read that it was recorded in a terraced house with the volume turned right down. The protected neighbours. How did you manage that?
It was recorded here where we're sat now, and it was, we don't have a studio or anything. It was just getting the laptop out on this table here and then packing it up when we were finished. And we've got neighbours either side, so we were quite self-conscious, I guess, with the singing, and it provided some restrictions, which I think in the end helped us, because when you go into a studio, you could spend days trying to find the right guitar sound, and this was more like, what sound can we just record, and
I think it had a consideration to it, like it's also a thing of like, we've always worked with these kind of producers who are quite specific in the way they work often, and that's really exciting. But we wanted to see what we were capable of ourselves, and yeah, there were kind of restrictions, but they were restrictions that played into how we wanted it to sound anyway. So it wasn't kind of like completely just a happenstance. It was more, this was an excuse to kind of see whether we could stand on our own feet. And I think, well, I personally found it quite an exciting experience, because it was like a chance to show, well, actually we do know what we are. We know who we are. We know what we need to sound like. We don't really need anyone else to tell us that. And actually we needed to do that for ourselves. And, you know, if we go on to work with other people, it will make us stronger, I think, because we've had this experience.
Well, Carried in Sound, you explore a variety of themes. Could you share some insights into the inspiration behind the album and the creative journey it represents?
I guess, I mean, it's slightly uncool to say, but it is kind of about getting older and like having that ability to reflect back as well as forward. Kind of like the journey you go on as a person. You get to a certain point in life, like me and Jessica are both 40 now. We've known each other since we were 11, 12. It's like, it's been a real kind of, yeah, we've been on this huge journey together, and we actually kind of are in a really interesting place now, I think, to look back and say, what does it mean to be kind of looking back? And loss and grief and stuff comes into it a lot, because inevitably that's what happens in life. It's a part of life. It's, you know, we're not trying to talk about it in a depressing way, but just this is how it feels. And you know, one thing makes the way for another, but you still have that loss to carry with you.
And no matter who you are, you're going to experience this kind of feeling of loss or looking back or reassessment of your life, I guess.
Maybe the decisions and
so hopefully we kind of just made it for the listener, and we hoped that the listener will find lines or kind of sentiments or even kind of melodies that really touch them and they could draw parallels with.
Yeah, well, I could definitely relate to it. I'm in the late 40s, and I spent a lot of time looking back and reflecting, and then you question mortality and stuff like that. So it definitely is definitely relatable.
That's good to hear.
The mortality thing is not something you want to like focus on a lot with music, but I guess there is elements of the album that are quite, I hope, positive, and sort of that idea of rebirth comes into it. There's a song called Seek It With Me that's kind of about looking forwards at kind of opportunities and, you know, love and being able to accept love. As you get older, I think you're more able to give and accept love, which is one of the kind of payoffs to all the experiences.
Talk to me about the cover of the record. It's a bit freaky, but I love it.
We're quite pleased with how that came out. We work with this photographer called Anik, and she's done quite a few of our videos, and we just got dressed up in some skirts and went out with her in our local area. We weren't sure really how we were going to shoot the album cover, but you start off a photo shoot knowing that you're going to capture something. And Kath had found this lane near our house that's kind of a bit disused, but for some reason has street lights on it and was kind of well lit. And yeah, we just ended up dancing around on that road. And
we sort of started having this idea that we needed to be in sync, but to be awkward within that. So like to kind of strike a really weird sort of almost odd pose, but to have that mirrored in the other person to show some kind of connection, but a kind of awkwardness in that too.
And I think the album covers that I like the most and the art that I like the most leaves you kind of questioning, like, what the hell is going on here? What's just happened or what's about to happen? And I think we were quite lucky to grab that shot by chance.
It's weird how similar the poses are, because we couldn't really see, but it kind of feels to me like we're kind of puppets and the strings have been cut and we're just flopping. And it's sort of an interesting visual metaphor for kind of how you can feel sometimes in like a relationship with someone else or in yourself.
It's one of those album covers. It's very iconic looking as well. And, you know, if you're in a record shop, you would lift it up and look at it and see who it is if you didn't know.
Well, that's great.
That's what we're hoping.
Good. I hope lots of people do. I mean, back in the day, that is how you chose a record. And I think we've always felt really strongly about projecting a strong image because, the old don't judge a book by a cover. Well, when we grew up, you did. I mean, when you went to like the record shop, you would, I guess, like where I grew up, it wasn't in my household like a massively musical family with like a huge record collection. So I didn't really have a lot to go on. The internet wasn't really the same kind of place it is now where you can just get what you want from it. And I would just pick things based on the cover and whether or not I'd heard about it in maybe a music magazine or something. But it really was the kind of way into so many records. And quite often you realise the cover is at odds with what's inside. And that would be frustrating. So we're always quite kind of picky about how we present that.
No, it really works. There's so many great songs on the album. Let's talk about some more. Vanishing Line, it was the first single from the album. What can you tell me about that?
Well, I guess it was about grief and the way that it kind of, like, I suppose when a person sort of disappears from your life, there is a kind of vanishing and they kind of hover around you like a sort of object or a sort of another person that's sort of following you around. I guess that's just a manifestation of your own feelings and grief around that person going. And it's sort of like you're living with a kind of bird or something. And there are lots of poets like Ted Hughes and stuff that have described it like that. And I really think it's an apt description because it feels very animal-like in a way. It's sort of uncontrollable and with you, like a kind of, yeah. And I suppose combined with the pandemic, when I sort of, you go out for your daily run, I remember just standing in the kind of, we live in an area that's kind of on the edge of, it's got a sort of urban elements, but also kind of woods and kind of space. So it's a kind of odd area because you can look right into the city, but you're kind of in sort of more spacious surroundings. And I used to run on the daily run up to the top of this wood and just look out on the city that seemed to have just gone cold and quiet and strange. And there's just this sort of mist hovering across the horizon. And I just kept thinking about everybody's grief and like, where is it? And where's everyone gone? Everyone had kind of left the city and it was kind of a husk really. And it had this sort of vanishing line as you kind of look to the distance. I suppose it was just a culmination of all those different feelings coming together and just trying to make sense of that feeling of, I don't know, where is everybody and where does everyone go? And, that kind of never ending question.
It's a beautiful song, and I love the video as well.
Oh, thanks.
Although it seems you spent a lot of time in the water, I'm sure that wasn't much fun.
It was freezing. So yeah, in the video we came up with this idea that we were going to be dead and there was going to be a procession, but then we become alive and fall into this. It was an amazing, actually, wild swimming spot we managed to find, but it was freezing. It
was quite nice though, because you kind of stepped in and like the mud was such a strange texture.
So squishy, yeah.
And sort of like, but they're just, we only had one shot. So as we were like sinking into the mud, we had to try and look very serene and sort of picturesque. But yeah, it was, we sort of had so many ideas for that video, but the one that we kind of pulled off was us being dead in the end. We did want to burn something. We wanted to have a massive bonfire to kind of like, as if we were sort of ancient ritual people, but it was the middle of summer and we were probably going to set fire to a whole field, so we thought probably best not.
And what's your writing process together? Do you both write the lyrics and the music, or do you write in the same room together? How do you do it?
We tend to write the kind of skeleton of a song, I guess, and then bring it to the other person. But there have been exceptions. So for songs like Vague Ideas, Kath had written kind of this underlying, the pads of the chords, I guess, and she recorded it and gave it to me, and then I wrote something over the top of it. So it kind of depends who's got what and what we want to, what we feel we can't finish alone.
I think, there's also a process though of like, sometimes I don't realise that a song is worth pursuing. Or I think something's better than it is. That's the other one. So it's really good to have someone who's like the kind of reflection point as well, to be like, okay, I should continue with this or drop this.
But I think on the few times where we've tried to write together, it ends up like, have you ever seen the Father Ted sketch where Father Ted and Dougal try and write My Lovely Horse?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like that sometimes. Even vague ideas, which turned out really well, had a definite My Lovely Horse moment in it.
Where someone ends up smashing a guitar over the other person's head. And yeah.
Was there anybody else, or anyone else involved in making the album?
It was, we got in a long-time collaborator, Neil, who plays viola. And so he would come in for a few sessions and layer up all these different viola tracks.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's sort of very, very intuitive with what he adds to a song. And you can say to him something weird like, can you just sound like a monk humming but slightly off? And he'll be like, yep.
A monk.
And yeah, and it's like, that's perfect, thank you. You know, it's like we've got that kind of relationship.
2002
is also a favourite of mine. What can you tell me about that?
That one was one that sometimes I take a really long time to write songs, and I think that had cropped up again and again in various different iterations. It didn't make it onto about 3 albums because it's just sounded slightly off. And I'd kind of started writing it. It's kind of tells the story of 2 people who keep meeting up year after year, even though they're very badly suited to each other. But they, for some reason, keep going, trying to pretend that they're good for each other. And I kind of took it and thought, there's something there with that, and reworked it a bit. And added the line this time round that I've not changed my ways, I'm still terrible. And then I thought, okay, it's done.
No, I love that song. I could listen to both your harmonies all day. Your voices blend together really beautifully. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Are there any particular tracks from the album that hold a special significance to both of you?
I mean, maybe Seek It With Me. It was the last one that I wrote on the album when we had kind of almost finished everything. And it's like, we just need one more song. And I just moved in with someone and I thought, no, I'll mark that with a little song. So I guess it has a personal significance, that one.
To celebrate the release of the album, you performed an intimate 5-date tour across the UK, taking in churches and ruins. I thought this was an absolutely brilliant idea. So how much did you enjoy the shows, and do you have any memorable experiences from the shows that stand out?
Yeah, quite a few. I mean, it's funny how 5 shows can be so different. Each one has had, when I look back on it, has its own kind of weird individual identity. And I think we did them back to back without a break, but from night to night, we really, like, our performance and our stage banter really changed. So we did a church in London, and that kind of had quite a reverence, and we were quite serious, and it was very kind of...
well, you start saying something and the audience react in a certain way, and you think, oh, no. So I need to back off. It was very intense.
That one was very intense. And then we played in Leeds, and
that was more of a basement thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that got a bit silly, and Cass started singing a song about a chicken that she'd written when she was 10 and got the audience to sing along with her. So we went from one night where we were very serious and didn't say a lot in between songs to having a chicken song sing along.
It's weird how intense it is playing in a church, actually, because you kind of think when you're setting up, like, oh, that'll be just really nice. And it is great because the spaces are obviously designed for this like lovely reverberance. And the focus from the audience, they kind of sit in the pews and they've got a certain feeling about being there, which really plays into the songs, I think. But then that intensity kind of comes back round to us, and it's like a lot to kind of keep that going, and you feel very kind of lost in it yourself somehow. So it's a weird experience, whereas when you're playing in a club, it's sort of a very different vibe. You know, you feel a kind of history of people kind of crowd surfing and just doing whatever people do in those spaces and throwing pints around, and it's just a different experience. And yeah, I guess we hadn't done it for a long time, so it was, I think the best thing about it was connecting to people again, because we'd been so insular making this record, we'd really cut ourselves off. But to really like remember that this is like speaking to yourself, you know, saying that you've kind of connected with it, that's what matters, and that's what makes us, kind of drives us on to keep doing the next thing, because we know that there are people that have kind of found an emotional kind of response there.
And going back, Smoke Fairies became the first UK band to sign with Jack White's Third Man label, and you recorded with them. What was that experience like?
It was kind of unbelievable, really. We used to go out in London with CDs or records, our records in our bags, just in case we bumped into each other. And one night, a friend of ours said that he'd heard a rumor that Jack White was in a bar that happened to be quite close to where we were. So immediately we were like, we're going to go down there and meet him. And you kind of in the back of your head think, oh, he's got a record label. Wouldn't it be amazing if he signed us and we got to go out to Nashville? But you never actually think that's going to happen. He showed up at this bar and we gave him our record. And then I think a few weeks later, he called up and said, do you want to come to Nashville and record? And so obviously it's just kind of it seems like a weird dream.
It was pretty interesting for us because he recorded on tape and it was very immediate and everything kind of needed to be finished. You know, there's a sense of urgency, I guess, to it that I think at that age and at that point in time was a really good experience, because it kind of gave us a sense of like, okay, there are kind of modes of thinking about recording. You know, we were quite naive maybe at that point to our own ways of working. And it kind of helped us to realize, okay, there are kind of ways of doing this that are kind of, you can really decide purposefully to do. And I think there's something about that we carried forward. You know, it's important to think about why you're doing something, how you're doing it, and not polishing it until it kind of, the life fades out of something, making sure that you retain the kind of oddness of something so that it sticks out above other things. You know, it has something different about it, something intangible, but it comes from a certain kind of process and a certain kind of mentality and I guess an authenticity to something.
I mean, in one of those, we recorded 2 tracks with him and it got quite late into the night because we decided what we were going to play, and then he actually played drums on it, so he had to learn the drum part, and we spent the whole day kind of getting the song ready. Then we hit record and it's quite late, and he obviously has some great equipment that is really old and vintage. And halfway through one of the songs, this weird kind of noise blasts out. It sounds like a saxophone, but it's actually the amp just completely blowing.
I think it's like the valve.
The valve just went. But it was there on the tape. And when we listened back, we were like, it's in time and it's in tune. And, you know, wow, that's got to be kept, that take.
Happy accident. Apart from the new album, you've recorded quite a lot of albums now. If you were to recommend one of your albums to someone who had never heard the band before, what album would you tell them to start with?
Ooh. I would go with, we did a Christmas album a while ago. It's called Wild Winter. And that's possibly my favorite, I guess, because we had a theme that we could write to. And I think we were allowed to explore quite a lot of themes within that about winter, religion, Santa Claus, love. It's kind of, for me, covers a lot, and it was a fun thing to write and sing.
Santa Claus. All the important topics are on that album.
Yeah.
I don't know. We do have like the singles, which is like our best of.
Yeah,
so
we've got a best
but
of
then,
for some reason.
I guess it's difficult to know whether to tell someone to start at the beginning or the end. I would always start from the present and work back. So I hope people find this album, find something they like, and then maybe dig into the rest. There's a lot. There's a lot. So if you like it, there's a whole scene.
Well, I love Christmas Without a Kiss from Wild Winter.
Oh,
so
thanks.
because it is Christmas, what's your favorite Christmas song?
Oh, it's hard to pick.
Oh, that is a hard question.
Because you've got your religious ones, and then you've got the kind of more, yeah.
I mean, I love a winter Christmas hymn,
like "See Amid the Winter Snow."
Yeah, I love all of that kind of sort of traditional hymns, because I think there's just something really stirring about the melodies. But then I also like the kind of more stupid ones too. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, I was listening to Rocking Around the Christmas Tree last night, and it is a classic.
There was a period of Christmas songs, it's like late 50s or something.
Yeah,
that seemed to just be like where it was at.
It's really hard to write a Christmas song, I suppose. I mean, you wrote a whole album of Christmas songs, so how challenging was that?
Well, we were doing it in summer as well. I can remember when we were recording that, we were eating ice lollies and trying to.
That must have been weird.
Yeah, trying to imagine the snow. But I guess Christmas is such an emotive time, and because it's celebrated by so many of us, and it can conjure up a whole range of emotions, it was actually quite an easy thing to start writing about.
We didn't want to write a kind of jolly Christmas album. We wanted it to reflect a kind of the plethora of emotions you might have at Christmas. So you might be someone that comes home to like a religious home and you're not religious anymore, and you're grappling with that. You might be someone who just is a kid who can't wait to get their presents. You might be someone who actually Christmas reminds you of like people who aren't there anymore, or a family you never had, or, there's so many emotions you could have.
You're the Three Kings. We wrote a song about what it would be like to be one of the Three Kings.
Yeah, the Three Kings, as if they were kind of like these weird party animals that went off. They weren't really looking for the baby Jesus. They just got a bit confused and then ended up in a disco. And who was there? I don't really know. It was an exploration of a different telling. But we did do a video about, we made a video of the Three Kings, which it was a kind of stop motion animation, and for some reason the only way we could like conjure up realistic snow was by pulverizing a cauliflower in a food mixer and making like a snowy landscape out of that, and it smelled like pure farts. It was so but when you are doing stop motion, you kind of have to leave the scene set up for days so that you can like slowly move the figurines to kind of like traverse this landscape. And we were not popular with our housemate at the time.
Just a few more questions left. I'd like to ask my guests the following questions. If you could go back and relive one musical moment from your career, what would it be?
Oh my gosh, why are we so stuck on this?
I don't know.
There's been so many. I think the problem is they all blur together.
I liked the very first tour we ever did was with Bryan Ferry.
Oh yes.
And we got the tour by pure chance, and we had been playing very, very small venues in London, like open mics. And then he took us on tour, and we went from open mics to the Royal Albert Hall, or to these vast venues all around the UK, and just stepping out onto a stage that is facing 3,000 people as opposed to 3 is an experience I don't think I'll ever forget.
I think that is a really good one, because I remember the very first gig we did on that tour, and I remember just not knowing whether when I stepped up to the mic anything was going to come out of my mouth, because I didn't know how fear was going to affect me, and just the kind of immense feeling of relief when a tune came out and thinking, actually I can do this. That was probably one of the best moments, because it meant that the dreams you had were feasible physically, I guess.
Yeah, it must have been amazing with Bryan Ferry. I mean, one of the coolest guys. Such an amazing artist.
Definitely.
And very kind to us at that point in our lives, definitely.
For us music fans, music is the soundtrack to our memories. What song or album, when you listen to it, brings back the best memories for you?
Oh, best memories. I find that a difficult question because a lot of my best albums I don't necessarily associate with the best memories, if that makes sense, because sometimes they're there to kind of like be a balm.
To soothe you when you're kind of down.
I would say when I was, one album.
I think it's always going to probably be for a lot of people the formative albums they listened to when they were teenagers, because you have such it's such an emotional time and a time full of such angst. And for me, it was the Sheryl Crow album, Sheryl Crow, and I got that, and it was the first time I'd actually like heard a woman playing guitar and singing about different lives she'd had. And as like a 13-year-old, it really kind of captured my imagination.
We were kind of like very much bonding over that experience, because I think there weren't that many women doing that sort of thing and talking about relationships in that kind of a way that was quite like, she was the narrator, she was a kind of, I suppose, a very strong kind of voice in it, but also like very talking about the fragility of things and the vulnerabilities. So I definitely, and I think I remember Jessica playing to me Joni Mitchell Blue, and I had never, I guess there just wasn't like the same record collection in my house, and Jessica had like Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, and kind of a lot of 70s kind of stuff and that kind of Laurel Canyon vibe. And I just had never heard anything like that. It was just, I remember hearing This Flight Tonight from Blue, that Jessica was like, oh, you've got to listen to this song, it's really amazing. And just kind of not being able to comprehend how a human being could kind of have thought of it and have let their mind and voice just kind of go so, I guess, free in terms of the way that she interpreted melody. And I still listen to that and get a kind of shiver, because it does take you back to that kind of realization that you can really do something with music. I think I got that a bit with Nick Drake as well, and people like that.
Yeah, all great artists, all great albums. I must actually listen to Blue. I haven't listened to it in a long time. Now that you put it in my head.
It's good when you remember albums again, isn't it? Like, why haven't I heard that?
I just think with that album, though, it's just so, the sounds of it, the sound she gets out of her instruments and the spaces between each chord, there's just something about it that's just, I think, perfect. Absolutely. And it has to be on vinyl. It sounds incredible.
I'm going to put you both on the spot here. What song or album is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, that's easy. I've got so many guilty pleasures.
We had to listen to most of Cass' guilty pleasures in the tour van last week.
I love an 80s ballad,
we had to listen to the Pina Colada song about 5 times. It is good though.
The Pina Colada song?
Yeah.
What's that?
Is that what it's called?
I think so. There's a guy and he's like, I kind of put together this Lonely Hearts ad, and it's like, if you like pina coladas and like dancing in the rain, and then this woman is like, responds to that. And when he gets to the meeting, twist, it is his wife or partner. And she's like, and he's like, and obviously they can't really get at each other because, well, they've both done it, haven't they? But they've done it with each other. I mean, it's a ridiculous idea, but it's so funny.
The Pina Colada song, check it out.
And then they go and have, I'm guessing, a pina colada together, go on a great holiday and rekindle the love that they've obviously lost.
I don't know that one now.
You're gonna really,
and I love 80s. I actually love 80s ballads and anything.
I love anything with a massive chorus. I like running to things with big choruses, so I can imagine I'm winning the Olympics. I was listening to Free Falling the other day. Neil was doing an amazing.
Doing karaoke to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think mine would have to be Hungry Eyes from the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. Again, a bit of an 80s ballad.
That's a brilliant soundtrack. I love it.
Yeah, I love it.
So maybe it's not that guilty, I think. But
And actually, I love thinking about guilty pleasures and trying to think, what is it about this that's so brilliant and so universal, and just like, how can it's actually useful with songwriting, because no one would ever think you've taken an influence from something like that, but there's something undeniable about a big chorus. And yeah, I don't know, I was sort of thinking when we were driving in the van the other day, listening to all the 80s guilty pleasures, like maybe this is the next direction, but no one will maybe know it because it won't have all the kind of crazy gated snares, but you know.
I know I love that soundtrack. I don't like to admit it, but it is good.
Let's just admit it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And the Grease soundtrack as well. It's another one.
I listened to that when I was a kid, and I wanted to be one of those people. I wanted to be in the pink gown.
So that's me done, guys. What can fans expect from Smoke Fairies in 2024? Are there any upcoming projects, tours, or anything like that on the horizon?
Well, hopefully we're going to go back on the road to continue promoting Carried in Sound at some point. And then we'll be doing our Guilty Pleasures 80s album, which is coming next. It's been decided.
We've got a podcast that we had been working on a while ago called Smoke Signals, which is was a really fun outlet for our slightly stupid side, which hopefully has slightly come across in this interview. And we might pick that up again, because once you go on tour, there's more to talk about.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you about the podcast, but forgot. Got sidetracked.
Oh.
And if you need any ideas for the 80s compilation for your next album, give me a shout.
Brilliant.
Okay. Will do.
Thanks very much. Really, really enjoyed talking to you. I love the album, and see, playing it this time of year, it has a real festive vibe to it as well. So it's brilliant. I really enjoyed listening to it.
Excellent.
Well,
thank you so much.
This has been very fun. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and hopefully next year you can come to Ireland, Belfast, Dublin.
I really hope so.
We'd love that.
Yeah, it'd be great to see us. We'll find a church. There's loads of churches around here.
There must be tons.
Let us know a good one and we'll come.
There's a castle just down the road as well.
Oh, amazing.
Even better.
All right. Well, listen, thanks very much for your time and for doing it so late. So really appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too.
You too.
Take care.
Okay, take care. Good night. Bye.
Bye.